Get ready for a story that'll chill you to the bone. Welcome to Cinemaned, where we dive into the most gripping tales of survival and heart. Today, we're stepping into a frozen nightmare. Stick around. This journey will leave you speechless. In the beginning of this story, we see a prison located deep in Siberia, where many German soldiers were held. After the end of World War II, many German soldiers were taken into custody by Russia and were assigned to work in lead mines. Although the security of this prison was quite minimal, no one ever tried to escape. That's because the prison was surrounded by nothing but snow and ice, and it was over 14,000 kilometers away from the nearest human settlement. So even if someone managed to escape, survival in the harsh Siberian cold would be nearly impossible. However, among the prisoners, there was one man determined to defy the odds. His name was Clemens Forell, and he had been sentenced to 25 years in this remote facility. But Clemens couldn't accept spending the rest of his life locked away. He longed to see his wife and daughter again, and he was willing to risk everything to make that happen. Then one day, Clemens found his chance. He managed to escape by hiding in a truck that was transporting coal. Once he was outside the prison, he looked up at the stars in the open sky, and for a moment, he felt pure joy. But his joy was short-lived. After traveling a short distance, the truck came to a halt. When Clemens peeked out, a Russian guard was standing there with a weapon waiting. Clemens was caught and brought back to the prison. As punishment for his escape attempt, he was placed in an outdoor confinement cell. 2 days later, the prison warden visited him, pulled him out of the cell and said, "Your fellow inmates are eagerly waiting to see you." When Clemens met the others, they were holding sticks in their hands. Their expressions were filled with anger, not relief. That's because, due to Clemens's escape attempt, the entire group had been denied food for 2 full days. As soon as they saw him, the prisoners attacked Clemens and beat him severely. The injuries were so serious that he had to be admitted to the prison infirmary. The doctor who treated Clemens was also a German prisoner. He was astonished by Clemens's bravery and determination. During their conversation, Clemens confided in him. He wanted to try escaping again, but this time, he needed help. The doctor tried to explain the harsh truth, that escaping alive was next to impossible. Even if Clemens did manage to get out, the deadly cold outside could end his life. But then he told him something chilling. Even staying in the prison was a slow death. The lead mines they were forced to work in exposed them to dangerous levels of lead through the air, something that could cause severe illness over time. The doctor warned Clemens that if he stayed, he could fall victim to life-threatening conditions. So, he encouraged Clemens to try escaping one last time. Determined, Clemens prepared once again. The doctor gave him all of his warm clothing and shoes. He also shared a crucial piece of information. Russian guards often stashed food supplies along the railway tracks. Along with this, the doctor also gave Clemens a firearm so he could protect himself during the journey. In fact, the doctor had originally gathered all these supplies for his own escape. But just a week earlier, he had learned that he was seriously ill and had less than a month to live. He handed Clemens a lunchbox and said, "If you make it out alive, please deliver this to my family and tell them, I'm no longer in this world." Later that night, under the cover of darkness, Clemens escaped once again. But this time, instead of hiding in a truck, he decided to make the journey on foot. By the next morning, when the warden discovered Clemens was missing, he immediately went to the doctor's room to question him. But before he arrived, the doctor had already taken his own life. The warden quickly dispatched several Russian guards to search for Clemens. The team scoured the snow-covered landscape for days, but there was no sign of him. Most people assumed that Clemens had frozen to death in the wilderness. But the warden knew Clemens's strength and determination. Deep down, he believed Clemens wouldn't give up so easily. That's why he ordered the search operation to continue. Meanwhile, Clemens was pushing forward through brutal snowstorms, powered by sheer will. 9 days had passed since his escape. Suddenly, he heard the barking of dogs. When he turned around, he saw a sled rushing toward him at high speed. Before he could react, the sled hit him and sped away. But just then, Clemens woke up. It had all been a dream. The truth was, Clemens had been walking non-stop for 9 days. His food had run out, and the exhaustion was overwhelming. Hunger and fatigue made it hard for him to continue, but he didn't stop. Eventually, his body gave in. Clemens collapsed and fainted from sheer weakness. Hours later, he regained consciousness and heard a strange sound nearby. When he opened his eyes, he saw a seal. At that moment, a spark lit up in his eyes. This could be his salvation. He quickly grabbed his firearm and took aim with all his remaining strength. But he missed. The seal began to escape, and Clemens chased after it. Just before it could slip behind a large rock and vanish into the icy water, Clemens fired his last bullet. By a stroke of luck, the shot hit its mark. Overwhelmed with relief, Clemens smiled. This meant he wouldn't have to worry about food for a while. After finally eating a proper meal and regaining some energy, Clemens rested briefly and then resumed his journey. Alone in the vast expanse of snow and ice, he pressed on, fighting the bitter cold, hunger, and isolation. In this harsh environment, Clemens's mental state could have easily begun to deteriorate. To stay focused, he kept talking to himself, repeating positive affirmations to stay motivated. He regularly checked his compass to ensure he didn't lose his direction in the endless snow-covered landscape. Days turned into weeks. After walking continuously for nearly 2 months, Clemens finally spotted something unusual: a small tree standing alone in the snowfield. Overjoyed, he ran toward it and hugged the tree with tears in his eyes. This tree symbolized something monumental. Clemens had finally crossed out of the Arctic Circle. Meanwhile, the prison warden was still determined to find him. He expanded the search radius to 500 kilometers, instructing his team not to give up. Back on Clemens's journey, he was making his way through a dense forest when suddenly, a fierce snowstorm hit. The storm was so intense that even large trees began to collapse. As Clemens struggled to move forward, one massive tree came crashing down on him. But fate was still on his side. 2 men named Sam John and Matten, who were prospecting for gold in the area, spotted him just in time and saved his life. The 3 of them then began traveling together. After several more days of walking, they finally emerged from the snow-covered region. Eventually, they came across a river. To cross it, they built a small wooden raft. While drifting across, they started sharing stories from their childhoods, bonding as they floated downstream. But suddenly, the river's current grew dangerously strong, and their small raft began to lose control. In the chaos, Sam John lost his balance and fell into the water. Since he didn't know how to swim, he began to drown. Without hesitation, Clemens jumped in and pulled him to safety. However, Matten saw this as an opportunity. He selfishly abandoned them, taking the raft and heading off on his own. After some time, Matten reached a small cabin where he and Sam John had previously stayed. Believing Sam John had drowned, Matten gave in to greed. He stole Sam John's share of gold and supplies. But shortly after, Clemens and Sam John arrived at the cabin. When Sam John realized Matten had betrayed them and stolen his belongings, he became furious. In a moment of rage, he shot Matten. Afterward, Clemens and Sam John packed their gear and resumed their journey. They continued walking for months, holding on to the hope that they would eventually find a human settlement. Eventually, winter returned, and the green forests around them were once again buried under thick snow. As they traveled, Sam John struggled with the weight of his heavy bag. Noticing this, Clemens offered to carry his belongings for a while to ease the burden. But Sam John grew suspicious. He feared Clemens might try to steal his gold. Overcome with paranoia, he attacked Clemens and knocked him unconscious. Sometime later, when Clemens regained consciousness, he saw a terrifying sight. A pack of wolves was approaching him. To save himself, he climbed a tree. But the wolves managed to grab his leg and began pulling him down. The tree, being thin and fragile, snapped in the middle and fell. Clemens's situation seemed hopeless. But just then, the sound of a gunshot echoed through the forest. When Clemens opened his eyes, he was stunned to see that all the wolves were lying dead. At the last moment, hunters from the area had arrived and saved his life. They brought Clemens back to their village, where the rest of the villagers looked after him and provided care. After years of struggle and hardship, Clemens had finally reached a human settlement. Surrounded by people again, his heart filled with joy. He stayed in the village for several days, and the villagers treated him with kindness and warmth. But one day, a notice was posted in the village, a message sent by none other than the warden himself. The letter warned that a German soldier had escaped from their prison, and anyone found helping him would be charged with treason. Faced with this danger, Clemens had no choice but to leave the village, though it pained him to go. Before his departure, the villagers gave him supplies and a loyal hunting dog to accompany him. Now, for the first time in a long while, Clemens had a companion on his journey. The presence of the dog lifted his spirits and kept the loneliness at bay. After traveling for many days, Clemens came across a wooden mill. As soon as he saw it, his dog ran off in search of food. Worried for his companion, Clemens followed him inside the mill. But once inside, the workers recognized him and brought him to their master. Clemens shared his incredible story with them. Moved by everything he had endured, the workers and their master sympathized with him. They offered him food and arranged for him to board a train bound for Germany. Clemens was overjoyed. The thought of finally reaching home filled his heart with hope. But what he didn't know was that the mill owner had informed the warden of his whereabouts. Now, the warden and his soldiers were waiting at the station to capture him. As the train approached the station, Clemens spotted the soldiers waiting on the platform. Realizing the trap, he jumped off the moving train and began to run. The soldiers noticed him and gave chase. Clemens dashed across the train tracks, only to find the warden standing right in front of him. In that moment, his heart sank. After everything he had endured, it seemed it was all about to end. But just as the warden stepped forward to seize him, Clemens's dog lunged and attacked, biting the warden and giving Clemens a chance to escape. Clemens ran with every ounce of strength he had left. But then, a gunshot echoed behind him. He turned around and saw his dog lying motionless on the ground. Devastated, Clemens held back his tears and continued running. He didn't stop. He couldn't stop. Climbing up a bridge, he timed his leap perfectly and jumped onto a passing train below, narrowly escaping capture once again. Time passed, and Clemens continued moving forward, one day at a time. Eventually, the year 1952 arrived. It had been 7 long years since Clemens had escaped from prison. Now he found himself wandering through a bustling village fair in Central Asia. The fair was filled with colorful stalls, food, music, and laughter. But Clemens had no money. He could only look at the delicious food and drinks from a distance and move on. Then Clemens saw 2 girls selling pancakes in the fair. He longed to taste one, but not a single coin sat in his pocket. With a heavy heart, he started to walk away in disappointment. But one of the girls, noticing his hunger and pain, felt compassion. She broke off a piece of her pancake and offered it to Clemens. Though he felt a bit awkward, he gratefully accepted and ate it. In that same fair, a Jewish man had quietly observed this act of kindness. He watched Clemens as he slowly made his way to a nearby church and decided to follow him. This man, as it turns out, had once been a war prisoner himself. He understood Clemens's pain, and instead of reporting him, he chose to help. He brought Clemens to his home, where Clemens finally shaved, cleaned up, and returned to his old self, both in looks and spirit. The man then handed him a new passport, allowing Clemens a chance to cross the Russian border and return home to Germany. Before leaving, Clemens sincerely thanked the man, and with hope in his heart, began the journey toward the border. Weeks later, Clemens finally arrived at the Russian-German border. With a pounding heart, he handed his forged passport to the Russian soldiers stationed there. For a moment, time stood still. Clemens feared the worst, that he'd be recognized, or that the passport would raise suspicion. But incredibly, the soldiers simply nodded and let him pass. That moment lit a fire of joy inside Clemens. He could hardly stop smiling. After all the suffering, he was finally on the edge of freedom. And then he reached the bridge, the very bridge that would take him back into his homeland, Germany. But just as he crossed halfway, a bright light suddenly flashed in his eyes. When he opened them, he saw the warden standing right in front of him. Clemens froze. Looking back, he realized he was still on Russian soil. His heart sank. If the warden arrested him now, everything he had fought for would be lost. But then, something truly unexpected happened. The warden, instead of arresting him, stepped aside. He looked at Clemens for a moment and then gave him a slight nod, allowing him to move forward. At first, Clemens couldn't believe it, but he stepped ahead, one cautious step at a time. The truth was, the warden had grown to respect Clemens, not just for his unbreakable will, but for his extraordinary courage. And so he chose not to stand in his way. Finally, after all the pain, the battles, and the years of struggle, Clemens crossed the border. He was home. He made his way back to the place where his wife and daughter lived. From a distance, he saw them leaving their home to go to church. Quietly, Clemens followed. Inside the church, his daughter noticed him. And in a moment of disbelief and pure joy, she ran into her father's arms. Clemens held her tightly, tears rolling down his cheeks. His wife soon joined them, and the three of them embraced after so many years of painful separation. That moment, that reunion, was the beautiful end to Clemens's unimaginable journey. And with that, this powerful, heart-touching story comes to a close. If you were moved by today's story, don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and leave a warm message in the comments.